Hello, and welcome to an episode of the Nutella Experience with featured guest and friend, Mr. Gutierrez. Today we will be discussing The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. To exist, simply to exist, it's not uncommon at this time. I mean, it's literally every black soul bordering on alive at that point. You are just out of college, right? Or just out of slavery, pardon. And you're simply occupying a place of just trying to stay alive. The people who actually occupy a place are the white people who are, those are the people who actually possess some form of means to change anything. The black people at this point are simply doing what they have to survive. They're not changing the means of how they can to survive necessarily. Yeah. The narrator for Invisible Man, he changed his way vaguely simply because of his educational background. Mm-hmm. He was able to talk to a few of. Well, he gave a presentation to the white folks, and he was able to give them sufficient enough education so that he got a scholarship to a black college, and that in itself changes everything. Regardless of whether it's a good or bad education at that point, it's still an education. So you still have kind of a form of changing it, mm-hmm. Although at this point he's also still invisible yet because he is young. He's not occupied a space enough to where he's able to change. I mean, he's too young, I think, in order to properly change anything for his betterment, because you still see him driving Mr. Norton around on his car, and he's telling stories to him for his entertainment, essentially. That's a start, I suppose. I mean, you're a driver. That's something, I suppose, but yeah. It's not necessarily what one would think when you're saying, I want to change my situation for the better. A driver is better than a farmer, of course, but you still want to be like merchant, businessman. That's the ideal at that point, and he hasn't quite gotten there yet, simply I think just because he's too young at this point, possibly.
But I don't know if I agree with that, because if we took a white kid the same age and put him in that situation, would he have more or less agency?
Simply because he's white, I think a little bit more.
Yeah.
He'd be able to do a little bit more of his situation simply because of the color of his skin.
So I don't know that the narrator is unable to change his situation because of his youth.
Well, I think it's a mixture of both, simply because his skin and his youth. I mean, he looks like he's about to go places because of his education. Granted, he hasn't quite finished it yet, but I mean, once he does, I think he has at least a little bit more means, perhaps open a store or something like that, in order to sell goods and stuff like that, and which is why I bring up his age, but also he can't just necessarily open his store anywhere he would like. That's just not simply how it works. He's gonna have to open it where it's predominantly black, and that, I suppose, is potentially a problem. Not necessarily a problem, but not for him, but
well, I think it is a problem for him, because
I mean, obviously he doesn't have as many people to sell his stuff to, and from a business perspective, that's always a problem. But I mean, considering what he's tried to do with himself, granted he's got himself an education, so he's gonna open a store, perhaps. I don't know. he could do him. I'm not sure what he's gonna do, but simply because of that nature, I think he's gonna do well with his current set of circumstances. Is what I mean to say. Sorry, keep
No.
going.
That sounds right. I guess the bigger problem is that even if he becomes a store owner and opens a store in a predominantly black area, Harlem, Baltimore, who knows?
Sure.
Has he become anything more than a placeholder in the larger society? In other words, has he achieved any real sort of social equity? Isn't he, in a way, still invisible, even with his achievement?
Yeah, no, he's still. I'd say yes. He's still invisible to just about everyone, because I mean, he hasn't really. I mean, if you look, I mean, in that case, I suppose there are a lot of people. I'd say, including whites, I'd say, that are still also just placeholders as well, that are still invisible to the public eye, because they haven't really actually done anything in order to properly change the way either people look at them, them personally, them as a group, as a stereotype, or...
Excuse me, Dad.
No worries, but it's... That in itself could be broadened. The idea of being invisible. I mean, if you look at it from a larger societal perspective, you could broaden that to not necessarily just himself, because he's very invisible. In which case I would be invisible too. I haven't really done anything yet to change people's perspective on a certain stereotype, on anything really. I mean, unless I've done that at my time at Academy, which I don't think I really have. You could I mean, a lot of people could fit under that specific stereotype of being invisible.
I think that sounds right.
I mean, that is if you look at it from a larger societal perspective. If you're looking at it from a more individualized perspective...
Sorry, Abraham.
No worries. Honestly, midday gets me like that too sometimes. It's the strangest thing. But no, I truly think that it's if you're trying to look at it from a more individualized perspective, I think that's where you truly ask is are you invisible? Because if you are truly invisible, you haven't had much of an impact, if any impact, on anyone. From what I can tell from him, if you were to open his store, or from his education, if you were to use it and do something with it and open a store, perhaps I wouldn't say he's not so much more invisible. He's at least done something with himself. He's impacted at least a smaller community, to the point where he can benefit them by opening a store, by selling goods to them. In that way, I would say he's not so much invisible. But I mean, in his current state, yes, he is very much so invisible, as he is only driving a car and telling people stories. They wouldn't quite necessarily know him as a person. They just know him as him.
Yeah.
I don't know if I explained that well enough.
Well, you know what's interesting to think about is, see if this works for you. Let's round it off and say this novel preceded the civil rights movement by about 10 years.
Sure.
Would you make the argument that with the rise of the civil rights movement and on its heels the rise of more radical black thinking like the Panthers and stuff like that,
right,
that was a step toward becoming more visible, a step toward
so like the civil rights movement being more of a step in not being as invisible anymore? I
mean, it's a different kind of achievement, right? It's not economic.
Right, that's a mental standpoint right there. So yeah, in that case, I mean, yeah, that those two movements in themselves, yeah, they very much so put us as a race on more so on the map than we were previously. Garnered a lot more media attention, and obviously that helps too. So yeah, we're not as invisible anymore. Granted, the way people look at us, because we aren't as invisible anymore, isn't exactly what we would like.
Would you still describe it as being the role of placeholder, or do you think it's something else?
I'd say it's something else. Because as of right, I mean, because at least we're on the playing field a little bit more than we were back before the civil rights movement.
Sure.
There isn't as much. I mean, we're not. I mean, granted, from an individual perspective, yes, we're still placeholders, but as a group, we're not necessarily that much so, because, I mean, people pay attention to us more so now. They look at us and they're like, okay, this is a person that can do something, whether it's, I mean, most of the time it's something bad, granted, but it's not just this is a person, this is a thing.
That's really interesting.
So I wouldn't I'm not sure what the word is that I'm looking for instead of placeholder. I'm not quite sure about that one yet, but we're not a placeholder anymore.
That's really interesting.
We're not so invisible.
If you've become visible by, as you say, doing something bad,
right?
Is that a desirable step?
Again, spectacular question. No, because that's hard to answer, because
right.
I'm thinking about this one line that Eazy-E and Ice Cube are saying about all attention is good attention.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's like, I mean, I don't want to be known as a murderer, a rapist, a thief, a drug dealer. I don't want to exactly be known as that. That's not a good reputation. That's not a good rap. But at the same time, not being a placeholder is a good thing as well.
Right. So
it has its pros and cons. But now deciding whether the cons are larger than the pros it's hard. I wouldn't quite be sure where to place where I would be able to place myself in that situation, just simply because of how the situation's played out. Because I mean, as far as invisibility goes, I feel like we're maybe one step under the whites, yet we're not too far under there, but as far as reputation goes, we're straight down the tube. There's not much I can do about that one. I don't know how far that goes. I don't know how far reputation takes back from a certain standing. At least not yet.
Yeah, it's that realm where one's, the personal becomes the political, right?
Right.
There's that sort of Venn diagram.
It's that large gray area right there, and I don't know where that takes us. It's hard, simply put, to figure out where we stand. But then also going back to the book though, I think it was like this first couple of scenes. This is where all the males had to they were in like boxing shorts and everything with gloves and everything. And then
Battle Royale.
Yeah. And then this one woman's just standing there, stark naked. Like, and then she just starts dancing for them all, and then they go after her. I don't understand what they were expecting from that. Cuz their reaction was it made sense, But I don't know what else they were expecting. It didn't make sense to me, because there's this woman standing there stark naked, and then there's just a ring of black guys around there and this woman's out, not even protected at all whatsoever. Like, if you put a ring of anyone right there, she will be chased. That's a given.
So the question is not what will they do, but why was she there in the first place?
That, and what did the white men expect?
I think they expect exactly what happened.
So it was simply just to have an excuse then.
Yeah, to humiliate.
To beat them up. Which
right? To sort of, how can you put it? To reaffirm your own prejudices. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, but that's a lot of time and effort spent to put yourself above someone else. I mean, granted, slavery always takes time and normalcy and stuff like that.
But you're a reasonable person, right? You're a person who...
I'd like to think so, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're a reasonable person, right? It's hard to understand the kind of fragility, right? That leads to feeling as though you'll go to those extremes in order to maintain your view of the social order.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sick.
It's very sick, and yet here we are. What?
Right, and this is one of the problems. Will you close the door?
Yeah, of course.
This is one of the problems I see with the white glorification of rap culture. Like, I think there's a real movement amongst particularly white males, right? And their attraction to, rap and gangsta culture. You could look at that from two different ways. One, you could say, well, this is the art going mainstream and appealing to a broader audience.
Sure.
Which you want, right?
Of course.
If you're an artist, you want to reach as many people as you can. You don't care.
You don't care who you reach. You just want to reach them. Yeah, that makes sense.
But are they reaching that culture because it confirms certain ideas about blackness that young white men may possess?
That's a good point. Because I feel like... I'm not sure how I want to put this. Because if they themselves possess it, then... And I suppose this is kind of a stupid question at that point. Then what reason do they have to suppress us like this? Then if they possess the same feel for the situation, for the same type of music and glorification of that kind of life, obviously they feel some type of way about it that the person who's making the music is, right? Because he's saying it, he's put it into words, he's verbalized it, and now this white male is feeling the same way, right?
But you're assuming that he's feeling the same way and that he's not looking
or simply he just likes the music.
It as a kind of like, not a joke exactly, but ironically.
Merely, I'm
a young middle class white kid.
He's doing it to be edgy.
Yeah.
Okay. That would make sense then, because if he were to accept the music, if he were to like the music, then that's a wholly different story.
Yeah.
Because then he would have absolutely no reason to be acting the same way as everyone else would be, in a way of ignorance towards the black community. There's simply no reason for him to be acting that way. Right? Because if he feels that way, and yet that's very hypocritical. He still acts that way towards blacks. He likes it though, but he still wants to maintain his post of power, I suppose. That's just about as hypocritical as you can get.
I agree.
So there's no reason for him. But anyways, that's that. But that's kind of whack. But also there's this one part in Invisible Man as well. There's when he made the speech and when he got his leather suitcase type thing, it's like a, I don't know, like a briefcase. There we go. And then he had his scholarship saying congratulations and everything. And then there's another paper, either that or it's on the back of that paper, saying, keep this nigga running.
Say that one.
He said it was like he talked to them. He got his briefcase. They made him open it up. They had the paper in there, right? And I forget whether it was on the back of the scholarship or a separate sheet in itself. But they had the scholarship. He opened it up, and then there was this other one. It's like, keep this nigga running right here. It's like, I wasn't quite sure whether to take that as a good thing or bad. I'm assuming it was bad simply just because of the time period and the situation. But you could also take that in a good way too. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. I don't know. But keep this nigga running. Obviously, I mean, like, away from you, or keep him running in the right direction, right. Or, I mean, it's very...
He's made it this far.
Keep him going. It's very open-ended. I'm not sure whether he intended it to be that open-ended, or whether there was a purpose in that. I wasn't entirely sure. I'm gonna take that. I mean, personally, I'm gonna take that in the more negative connotation, saying keep him running away from us, because obviously his education's not gonna be as good, right? And then you could have him simply thinking he's going in the correct direction, meanwhile he's kind of going in the right direction, but he's still
spinning his wheels.
Right. He's going around in circles, or simply just making himself feel like he's doing something. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, they're just having fun with him, messing with him, having him go around in circles. But it's a lot more fun to think optimistically, I think.
I like that interpretation.
I wasn't sure whether it was supposed to be in a positive or negative. I
think it's supposed to be negative, but I like exactly what you're saying. It certainly plays into the discussions we've been having.
Right, and yeah, especially given the situation that he's in afterwards, when he's talking to Mr. Norton, who is very kind, if not kind, then polite towards him.
Yeah, good distinction.
He's very polite towards him in that he's giving him conversation, stuff to talk about, and that it makes you think that maybe he's a part of this game as well, making him go around in circles, or in fact that he is quite, in fact, trying to give him a head start, making him go ahead, push farther than where he actually already is. Mm-hmm. Which also furthers my ideas of confusion and ambiguity on on that topic. I'm not entirely sure.
That's great.
But yeah, no, there's a lot of gray areas in this book that I'm not entirely sure if he intended it as well. I'm very early. We didn't. Certainly, I've like scratched the surface on this, and I haven't read the entire thing yet. But it's curious to have. It's curious that he made it so open-ended, especially towards the beginning. This open-ended, because granted, the other books were a little bit more, I wouldn't quite say focused, but they had a little bit more, they weren't as ambiguous. They were a little bit more clear.
Totally agree.
Especially Native Son. That is
totally agree.
And its essence was, this is this man. He is in this situation. This is his life. That is, they start in the middle. and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that.
Hang with it.
For certain. I mean, I've started it. I can't simply just not finish.
Oh, you'll finish it.
Finish it in the next few hours, probably.
Hey, what are you doing for your presentation?
I'm doing the science fair type deal.
Okay. So you're gonna be set up tomorrow evening?
Yeah.
Will you come when you're setting up so I can walk over there and check it out? Because I'm not gonna be able to stay.
Yeah, of course, no worries.
Because I have my kids.
No, of course, no worries at all. Like, what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have like this like poster board thing, and then I'm gonna outline a few of the key ideas.
You should. You should have all the books you read too.
No, I definitely will. And then the key ideas that they listed out, and some of the music, and I'll have my laptop there if people want to listen to what we were talking about as well.
Cool.
But yeah, no, that's the general idea. But yeah, no, it's so ambiguous. It's got me going. It's really, it's.
I like it. You know, Richard Wright has received a lot of criticism for Native Son on various different levels.
I mean, I can understand why he's caught so much flack for it.
Yeah.
It's you definitely understand it, but as well,
But Ellison, you know, I think there's a level of complexity to Ellison that, and nuance that maybe Wright.
Right, and it's.
Lacked.
It's.
Or I just.